Good morning. Are you good people of the fourth year? This is um, uh, the first electronic class after the um, mid-year exam. I think I have talked about contracts. Well, I mentioned that I'll discuss contracts later in this academic year, and here we are. Contracts tend to be slightly a difficult topic because of the number of or the types of contracts that we have law wise. In law, we have so many types of contracts. Um, so, the reason why it's difficult to translate these contracts is, um, first of all, because there are a lot of them out there. Second of all, which is the core of the issue, especially in Kurdistan region, is because Kurdistan region, people in Kurdistan region are not really familiar with contracts. They are not used to contracts. They don't use contracts. They do not sign contracts once they have a business or something between themselves and other people, other parties. So it's slightly difficult. People, you don't get across lots of contracts in Kurdistan region. So that's one of the reasons. That's the second reason, I mean, as to why contracts are difficult for people to translate. All right. So what are contracts? Contracts are basically agreements. It's an agreement that you and another person or another party um, agree on certain conditions to do something. Okay, so that's a layman's definition of what a contract is. If we look at types of contracts, we have a unilateral contract. Well, there are two general types of contracts, two general ones. There is unilateral, as it says here, unilateral, and there is bilateral. Unilateral, if I were to translate it to Kurdish, if I translated to Kurdish, it's translated to have pay. Sorry, I was gonna say have pay one. It's wrong, by the way. It's have best. Have besta yek loyani. Unilateral. It means it's only one person who decides the condition of a contract. A bilateral, which is the other general type of contracts, is the second type, which is translated to have besta dulayani. It means two people set forward some agreements regarding something. That's a bilateral contract. Your dulayani, have best or dulayani. Some people translate it to have best. Some people translate it to gre best. Both of those are correct, but not have paymon. Okay, have paymon is something else. In English, that's a treaty. That's between countries, and it's more of a political thing. All right, so do not translate it to have paymon because have paymon is something else. Now we know we have two general types of contracts, the unilateral and also the bilateral or the bilateral contracts. What about other sorts of contracts? Well, regarding a unilateral contract, have best though, iklaini, it could be an adhesion contract. As you can see right here, I'm not sure if the cursor is showing as I hover on this part right here. Adhesion contract. Adhesion contract means a person sets the conditions of a contract according to their own interest. Whatever is in the interest of the party who's setting the agreement or putting the conditions of an agreement, those agreements are put forward. Adhesion contract. If I were to translate it, unfortunately, we don't have any specific Kurdish word for adhesion contract. All right, I mean a phrase to use as an equivalent for adhesion contract. But in Arabic, it's عقد إذعان. Okay, now this requires some sort of explanation. Okay, it requires some sort of understanding why it's called adhesion. Adhesion basically means it's the person who, there's one person who controls the whole contract, and there is an element of injustice in the contract. Okay, because it's not just, all right, it's not well, it's legal, but it's not really taking into consideration the interest of the other party. It's called an adhesion contract. Okay, so one thing about this adhesion contract is that the majority of the cases of the contracts that are available in Kurdistan region, the ones which I'm familiar with, of course, I'm not saying all of them, but I would say about 90%, all of them can be categorized as unilateral, adhesive, or adhesion contracts. Not adhesive, sorry. Most of the contracts signed in Kurdistan region are unilateral. There's one person, one company who controls everything by means of an adhesion contract. Okay? All right. What about, so now we know what an adhesion contract is. Let's carry on. Suppose, let's talk about now distribution agreement, requirements contract, and agreement of sale. Let's talk about these three types of contracts, or three types of agreements and contracts, because not every agreement, I think there's a statement in law which is presque vous, as French people say, on the tip of my tongue. I think it says every contract is an agreement, but not every agreement is a contract, something like that. The difference between agreement and contract is that agreement is anything general, okay? But contract is a very specific agreement about something. Legally speaking, by the way, I'm not talking about how language-wise is used by people. I'm not saying how people linguistically manipulate these words, okay? Put language aside, although you're becoming translators, but still, because this is a legal translation, you need to understand that when we talk about agreement and when we talk about contract, these two concepts are specifically different than how people use these vocabularies in their day-to-day use, okay, or in their daily usage of these terminology, these words. Okay, regardless, let's just carry on with this because it's taking too much of our time. So what is requirements contract, distribution agreement, and agreement of sale? Let me give you an analogy, an example to explain these three concepts. Let's start with requirements contract. Suppose I am a Chinese factory that is specialized in basically making iPhones, okay? So what I do is that a requirements contract is that I will sign a contract with Apple to supply me, to give me with the requirements I need in order to create a mobile phone, an iPhone. That's called a requirements contract. I ask them to give me, let's say, the silicone that is used, the processes. I talk about the RAM. I'll ask them to give me those sorts of requirements. This is part of the requirement contract. Once I collect everything, assemble everything, and I make a phone out of those things which I've asked Apple to supply me with, I will give it to Apple, the company. Apple, in this case, will sign a distribution agreement, okay? Distribution, it means allowing a person to distribute, to disseminate, although disseminate is used with information, just to give you another word for distribute, to distribute the products that they have, okay? So let's say I am Apple company. I received those iPhones, which were made by the Chinese company. I received them, okay, and I give it to specific people. Let's say some people in Iraq, some people in Turkey, some people in Saudi Arabia, whatever country. I'll sign a contract with them They give them the right to distribute those mobile phones. An agreement of sale is an agreement between the distributor and outlets, the basically shops that have the right to sell those to sell those products. Now let's talk about the translation of these vocabularies. Requirements contract is translated to havesta pedivion. Okay? Distribution agreement, اتفاقية بلاغة کرنه. Agreement of sale, اتفاقية فروشتنه. Okay? What about severable contract? Severable contract. A severable contract, legally speaking, is a very large contract which is made up of parts or other contracts. So let's suppose, let me clarify this to you, because it seems, I think many people have issues with understanding what a severable contract is. Simply speaking, a severable contract is a contract that is made up of more than one contract. So it's one big contract and has other small contracts, okay? If I were to translate it to Kurdish, havbesta parça parçayı. Severable, it means parçebun, parçayı. As I said, it means it's made up of different or more than one contract. Finally here it says, not really finally, just in this paragraph right here, it says implied contracts. What is an implied contract? This is a contract in which there is no expression of a contract, neither is there any sort of signing or paper that says there's a contract between two people. Let me give you an example. This requires an example. So there is no one says, okay, we agree on this. There is no one brings out any pieces of paper that says, all right, now we sign that I'll do this for you and you will do this for me. Okay, there is nothing like that. It's called an implied contract. The best example of an implied contract, legally speaking, is suppose one day you go to a restaurant. Once you go to a restaurant, you enter a restaurant, you sit down on a table, you order a food. That's an implied contract for the owner of the restaurant to provide you with food, and then in return you pay money for the food that was served to you. Okay, that is fulfilling an implied contract. I hope the example is clear. If there is any sort of misunderstanding, I'll come to the classroom and explain to you what an implied contract is. Contracts of employment is any sort of contract of employment. Okay, havbesta توظیفی بینه یا کارایی. If someone is working in a place, they have a specific contract of employment. Wait a second, there's a word for it. What is employment in Kurdish? Shoot. Well, you know what happens. A lot of times you forget about words. توظيفية, okay, basically توظيفي. Contracts of employment, in this case, is you're the boss and you have a lot of employees. You have created some sort of contract by which every employee in your company or in your business is legally bind themselves with the elements or the conditions of a contract. Okay, so that's the contract of employment. We'll discuss these further in the classroom. One final vocabulary phrase that is used oftentimes in contracts is the phrase breach of contract. If any one of the parties involved in a contract does not bind themselves
with the elements or the conditions of a contract, they're committing a breach of contract, and one of the parties is ready, or sorry, has the legal right to file a complaint against the person who has breached the contract. In Kurdish or in Arabic, if you're to translate it, is kharqa, kharqa, havbeste. Ne peygiri kenin, ep havbeste, yon bandin havbeste. Breach of contract. As I said, we'll talk about this further in the classroom. Bear in mind, contracts are extremely monotonous topics, very boring, and, well, not really boring, but could be boring to some of the students, but it has a lot of information because contracts, law of contracts are extremely vast. The contracts themselves are extremely vast, and there's a lot of types of contracts waiting for you to be translated. Thank you very much for paying attention. If you were paying attention, have a very lovely day and take care.